connecting. Can you? Joys of live streaming. So we're trying to get a guest on there. So I apologize about the short delay, but I'm going to start day 3 of my Bike for Tiger challenge. Well, it's a very virtual challenge because I'm sitting here pedaling a bike in the middle of my office in Somerset in the United Kingdom. But just to put me in the mood, I'm going to put my old field hat on that I always wear when I'm in India. I keep the blazing sun off me because, as you can see, I burn quite easily, and I need to have that on. So welcome to my little show. We're going to have some fun, talk about a few things. So I am traveling now on day 3. I've been in Pench Tiger Reserve for the last couple of days, talking to some of my chums and talking about the wonderful Pench Tiger Reserve that is. And we are now going to move from Pench, and we're going to travel across a lovely bit of corridor forest between Pench and Cicada. And I have spent 20 years in these forests and around these forests, and this forest today is a particular interest to me. It's somewhere I spent a lot of time and which I've biked through 3 times already, and so I'm very familiar with it. And I'm going to be bringing on, I hope, a couple of guests who are also very familiar with it and had joined me as traveling companions on my challenge a little while back now. Now, part of this challenge is having to be virtual. It's a travelogue, and we're having to do it virtually, and I'm going to be showing you some lovely photographs. But part of it is to also raise money for soft tigers, as it says there. And the reason being is we're trying to support the communities that are now in some difficulty. Many of the people are dependent on nature tourism. The parks are closed as part of this challenge. So the idea is not only for me to show you the wonderful landscape of Madhya Pradesh and India itself and all their great biodiversity and present that in a lovely way, but also to raise some money. So if you're ready and you're happy to give a few bob, few rupees or pounds or dollars, whatever you want to us to help us on the way, we'd be most grateful. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about what goes on here. So let me just get to I've got to do a little bit of directing here as part of the deal. And I started this whole process because we ran what was called the Bike for Tiger Challenge, and we could actually do it in those days pre-pandemic. And off we went, and we've done that 3 or 4 years. It's a big fundraiser, and we do exactly the journey I'm talking you through today. So it's a wonderful, wonderful route. We do, just to prove that I've done it, I'll show you a picture of me going through one of the villages. And they are very, very pretty villages and lovely farmlands, as well as forest lands that we actually travel through. Forest lands that the government protects, they're called reserve forests in India, and they protect them as part of that process. And it was a while back now, 10 years in fact, that I got together with the forest department, and we tried to look for some landscape, some wild landscape, potentially a bit denuded or degraded and needed a bit of support to set up a sort of community conservancy, community-owned sort of tiger reserve outside of the normal protected area system. So I had the pleasure of having a field officer with me, D.V. Kapil. He's going to be coming on with me today on my little journey, but sadly I think we're having a bit of technical problems with him. But anyway, he very much part of what we're going to do. Now I'm going to just show you, in fact, what I'm doing. And this is a little bit of a giveaway because there I am, there's my office, and I'm on the bicycle moving through. So I'm actually doing a bit of biking, putting some mileage in as part of this landscape. I can actually move and hold my lead. My son has put a very good device to allow me to built one and to allow me to pedal at the same time as sit by my desk. And we are now going to go. So just to put you in the picture in terms of where we're moving from, right behind me this light yellow is Madhya Pradesh. It's bang in the center of India. It's not a particularly good map. I'm sorry, I'm right in the middle of it. And behind me is the place called Nagpur. Bang, the sort of ordnance survey center of India. And from there, we are moving around the great swathes of forest that are part of Madhya Pradesh. So that's where we go. When we actually get into Madhya Pradesh, which is a map here, you can see over here, wrong way, over there, we're moving between those two yellow stars. One is, in fact, that journey is the arrow between those two stars there. And that is between Pench Tiger Reserve and Cicada Tiger Reserve. So two really well-known, iconic tiger reserves that people can visit. They are actually sadly closed at the moment because of the pandemic, but under normal circumstances, it's wonderful to visit. Incredibly hot and at the moment, this time of year, but they have so many wonderful seasons that you can choose when you want to go through the year. Now, I'm going to effectively get up today and we're going to start pedaling. And here's a picture of us all pedaling through forests between these two tiger reserves. And these are forests which I 10 years ago was spending a lot of time and was getting a bit excited about. It was a reasonable landscape that we had here, about 300 square kilometers we thought we could to include into this sort of landscape. And I was looking at it to do that. And we decided to pedal through it more recently. And it's a lovely place to pedal. You go through little villages with all their cattle and their lovely homesteads, very pretty homesteads, very beautifully built, wattle and daub, so dung and earth. And it's a very, very pretty way to see it. It's a really great way to see India, nice and slowly, as it should be done. And then you would often stop, as we did. In a particular place I spent a lot of time and was Cicada Guest House. And these are really interesting buildings. I think this one, you can just see it. I think it was built in about 1903. So it was the time of the British Raj, and they had, for their forest officers, they had built hundreds and hundreds of these lovely rest houses in some of the most pretty parts of India. And basically it was for their foresters, for their forest service, looking after all these forests. In fact, half of them for 50, 100 years before had been chopping down these forests for railways around the world. But here were these forest rest houses where they would stay and where we could get refreshments now and where you can stay in a number of places around India. So that was a lovely thing to be able to do. And we'd stop there for a drink on our travels. So now I still don't have my guest to come in here, but I'm going to continue. So as we bicycled, and I was bicycling, we would often see spoor. And here's a good example. Here's some scat, some sort of tiger poo right there as we bicycled over the top of it. It was very fresh. We were all very excited. I was telling them, oh, it's not too long ago, but in fact it was very fresh and very smelly. And so we knew damn well that actually it was probably not too far from where we stood that very moment. And this was in this area called Ruka, which is now part of the Pench Tiger Reserve, but 10 years ago wasn't. And this is where we got terribly excited about making it into a conservancy. So I then spent a bit of time 10 years ago with my friend, colleague, and ex-forest officer called D.V. Couple Sub, as I always call him. And you can see us sitting while we're doing some hard research, as you can imagine, on our travels. And basically, I'd spent 6 weeks looking for landscapes. So we had this wonderful excuse to go around the whole of India. We had a sort of open book in terms of where we could do it. And it just turned out this was the place I ultimately decided to look at and to see if we can make it happen. So that was a glorious, and I'd love to talk to you about my friend D.V. He, wonderful man, very jocular, very good traveling companion. We had a lot of fun. He was, he had retired from the ex-service when we were there, and we spent 6 weeks together going around Madhya Pradesh, and we spent a lot of time talking to the various communities who live on the borders about places, about wildlife conflict they might have, how the herbivores coming out of the forest would come and eat many of their crops, and pigs often, and a range of other issues they had with the wildlife that was close to them. So they suffer quite a lot of that conflict. But then we also talked quite a lot, and you can see me sitting here with some forest guards who are critical to supporting Madhya Pradesh and its forests around the whole of India. They are an amazing force, work incredibly hard and look after all of the forests. And it's the reason why effectively we still have those tigers, those wild tigers in the middle of the forests in India, and why they're doing so well. We did, unfortunately, also, and it's probably unfortunate for the poor fellow who actually was in that track when he's got his slipper caught in it. He obviously was walking and he tripped on what's called, which is effectively a tiger trap. And that was how they capture tigers, how they poach tigers in these areas. And of course, these areas that we're looking at were areas that weren't as well guarded as the national park. So poachers would come in and set these traps to try and get these tigers. And that was a good example. And obviously, someone unfortunately had got themselves zapped by these nasty sort of steel traps that close very, very hard on toes and on feet and stopping everything. So I've got to a point now where I'm going to bring on a man who's a visionary, really, someone who always set himself up to do different things, was always prepared to look outside the box, and was really important to me when I tried to talk to him very much about how nature tourism could help save wild tigers and how you can use that effectively. And there he's just popped up, Dr. Havajan Habla. He was the ex-chief wildlife warden of Madhya Pradesh. Wonderful man, and lovely to welcome to my little journey. Now we did try to. Now you're not on a bicycle, Pablo?
I'm imagining I am.
Okay, well, join me on my ride. That's all I'm asking. Join me on my ride.
Right.
So I'm gonna give you a different picture of him when he's actually in the wild. There he is.
Oh, I see.
You can have your pick of whichever one you want to watch. But it's lovely to have you. Thank you very much for coming. Now,
Pleasure, Julian.
Pablo, when we sort of arrived, when I arrived in your offices, you were Chief Wildlife Warden, Big Chief, and you kind of had a vision. We had already got this idea that a conservancy potentially was something that we could help you with. And I think you'd met a couple of the backers who were keen to do that as well. What was your feeling at that time about that sort of approach?
Can you repeat your question? I missed part of your last sentence.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm just saying, what was your feeling about the approach then when we first came to you and said, come on, why don't we try and look at a sort of public-private conservancy?
Julian, I had been talking about this approach more than 10 years when we met.
That's a good start.
And so when you came,
can you see me?
We've had,
sir, yes, you're there. I can see you.
Couples up. We've had couples up join us. How fantastic.
थोड़ा अपना स्क्रीन को आगे करो. चेहरा आधा दिख रहा.
Hi, TV. Nice to have you with us.
Yeah, he's there now. Okay, so yes, Julian, when we started talking about these issues, it was absolutely wonderful for me because there was somebody who was trying to further my own agenda. And why we did not succeed in that is still a bit of a surprise to me because in the year 2000, my own department, I was only middle-level officer at the time, asked me to work on this idea.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was originally probably not my idea, but my PCCF at the time, Mr. D.P. Singh, he asked me can you develop a program like this? So
Yeah.
I developed a PPT and made a presentation in Jahanuma Hotel in a
Okay.
program called Mystique Madhya Pradesh. It
Okay.
was a tourism conference where I put up this idea that we want to create a recreation forest in Madhya Pradesh, where we will hand over forest land up to not less than 2,000 hectares to private operators who would develop a ecotourism and forest management plan for that area. And after the approval, then they can manage it, and they earn money from primarily from ecotourism, then
Exactly.
share the revenues with the communities.
That is amazing because, you know, I didn't realize because it was a very soft sell to you when I came along.
Yeah.
So you're obviously totally convinced about that easy. So I landed
Right.
on the right place.
Yeah, that's right. I think I've been lucky. I've been meeting the right kind of people towards the end of my tenure. And that's why we were able to do a few things which looked rather odd at that time, but we did them.
Yeah,
Okay,
lovely.
so after that date, Julian, you know KK Singh.
Of course, yeah,
Yeah,
KK, lovely
KK
KK.
and I, we continued to push this agenda a little bit, but then when you came and we developed that specific program for Rukher, it was something which I wanted to do before I retired. But as you know, it was probably a little radical and we didn't succeed in doing it. But probably it was, I think, the same idea which Maharashtra picked up and then came up with the conservancy, community conservancy regulations, which are in place now. And I hope somebody takes advantage of that and sets the ball rolling now. So I think you came as a godsend to me.
I don't know if my wife would agree that it was a godsend, but
I know all wives are like that.
because I spent so much time away at the time, if you remember that. So,
yes, that's right.
DB, lovely to have you with us on this. You and I, as I say, we've talked very, very briefly about this, and I've had you up. So I'm going to just quickly head back, and you may remember when we were in Ruka, we spent a lot of time walking and stuff, and you're always going, oh, Julian, every morning, do we have to go walking? Can't we go in the car? I said, no, we've got to go walking, DB. We've got to couple up. Come on, it's good for you. We're going to take you walking, and we're going to look at the spoor and see what wildlife's there and see what's written in the sand, basically. So we kind of knew whether the place was good to go. And you remember it fondly, I hope.
Routine. We were doing the same thing every day, and yes, we did a lot of exercise.
चेहरा नहीं दिख रहा थोड़ा
अच्छा ऐसा दिख रहा है
हाँ अब ठीक है
अब ठीक
अब
है
better
Yeah, that's good. So we kind of spent a lot of time, got up very early. I mean, far too early, really. And I remember sometimes, and we used to say to me, "Do we have to climb the hill?" And I would go, "Didi, yes, we're going to go and climb a hill again today." And there was one particular shot that I liked, and was this one, and we're in the Ruka.
You recollect everything. You are just computer in yourself. Everything.
No, I'm reminded luckily.
Remember everything.
Because we had a very lovely time, and we climbed up hills and down what we call dales here. But
I think Dr. Saab, 45 days continuously. No forest officer must have ever.
I was so jealous of you during those days.
I kept inviting you, Pablo Saab. I kept inviting you.
I think at least twice I made a program, but I had to cancel it.
You did. You joined me in Pana.
Yeah, I wanted actually. Yeah. You guys had a great time, but I kind of kept imagining what you would be doing there.
Yeah, exactly. And
it was our good fortune. Dr. Pavla was PCCF at that point of time.
Of course, yeah. Well, that's always it's often these things are about chance encounters and right timings and all that.
Absolutely right.
So
He was on one side, and all the other conservationists, so-called, and everybody, the officers at Delhi, they were all opposing the proposal. Unfortunately,
yeah, of course.
Hmm?
And that's why you both were such a. And I think, DV, if I'm correct, I began to convert you a little bit to the idea yourself, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
And I laughed because very kindly
Ah.
DV then wrote a book, and he wrote a
Nice.
lovely book, and it's called The Incredible Tales in the Wilderness. And he
Right.
dedicated a whole chapter to me
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
journeys here. Chapter.
Both of you are there. Both of you.
Yeah, both. Yeah, we're both there. So it's to both of us.
Everywhere.
A really fun read of a forest officer's
Right.
life in the wilds. And of course, Stevie, we talked a lot about your early days in wildlife conservation in
Right.
the sort of forest department. And they were so different, weren't they, when you had to go by bullock cart everywhere, where you had
Yes.
to make your own meals
Yeah.
and all that. Do you remember? And it's fascinating.
My cart.
Yeah, when you went by bullock cart, when you traveled everywhere before
Your younger
cars
days.
came.
Doctor, do you know that? I think I never told it to you.
Oh no, you did. You did. Now,
When I
I think a few times we have spent time together, so we.
okay.
those
You know
things.
it. You know it. You know it.
Yeah, when you were in Buster, I remember.
Yeah.
Buster.
Yeah, Buster.
Now, I remember a very funny thing happening, DB. And it was, we were sitting with the Suka, all the people of Suka, and we were discussing this idea of having this conservancy and what would we do. And I think one of the, you asked one of them, one of the panchayats, one of the kind of mayors of these villages, now what is the difference between me as a forest officer and the old Gorasats from years ago? And he said, sir, you only drive around and shout orders from your window. They worked.
I see.
That made me laugh. I just remember that because I can't remember, it was raining or something and they were planting trees and stuff. Anyway,
Yeah,
so we had so much fun together on that trip. Now, let's just, and of course, what was exciting about this, I'm just trying to get, what was exciting about this was that, of course, we found spores. So in Ruka, which was outside of Pench, and Pench at that stage didn't have quite so many tigers as it does today. And Ruka was very migratory, sort of tigers. So we found a lot of spores. So it got me excited about the area. One of the things that I came back from my trip with after our trip in Ruka was the issue that India has with its numbers of cattle around the forest areas. And Pablo, I don't know if you agree with me, but I remember saying on a film that I did at the time that actually the cattle were grazing the tiger out of existence. Is that an interesting analogy in some ways?
Yeah, I do agree. I've been, I mean, all my life has primarily dealt with overgrazing essentially.
Yeah.
And we did try to kind of introduce some systems where maybe, such heavy overgrazing can be made somehow sustainable and it can exist along with whatever else we wanted to do. But that's the reality now. I think cattle population probably is going down, but going down a little too slowly because a lot of people now don't want to keep cattle. Keeping is becoming difficult because you have to spend time out in the wilderness or you fetch fodder for them. And the young kids no longer want to have that kind of life. In my own village now, we have no cattle virtually.
Really?
Yeah.
And you're originally from the Punjab, aren't you, Boss, right?
In Punjab, yes. So it must be happening everywhere.
Oh.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know whether you met Mr. PM Lad. he was a retired old forest officer, one of the most brilliant wildlifers of our state, very passionate fellow.
I sadly didn't.
And he used to work on vultures when he died, actually. And he went around the country looking at the condition of vulture. And his theory was that the diclofenac is a fraud. The real reason why vultures are vanishing is because the cattle population is going down. They have nothing to eat.
Oh,
Really?
So
Wow.
whether he's right or wrong is a different issue.
I've never heard that.
But that was the feeling he had carried, and he was a very experienced, very passionate wildlifer.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, so I think whether we can fill this gap, which is now probably emerging as a result of livestock population probably going down. Maybe we have to check the data. Then let's see how things shape up because new equilibrium is never the same which we expect.
Yeah, and of course one of the conflicts, the big conflict that's still happening, and it's happening because to some extent tiger populations in national parks are going up, is that the conflict with livestock is increasing because the prey base is low, so they have to then to keep that number of tigers, they then have to prey on cattle, and that causes them conflict with the local community.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, around the year 2000, I started looking at livestock deaths at the hands of tigers and leopards in Madhya Pradesh. And I found a continuous decline from my days. When I was in the field as a DFO, the annual loss of cattle recorded, I mean, actually, we don't know how much was actual, but whatever we paid compensation for used to be around 4,000 per annum.
Okay.
And by the year 2000, it had come down to about 600.
Okay.
So that was, so my conclusion at that time was that we are running into a very difficult situation as far as the number of predators in the jungle is concerned.
Yeah.
And then it emerged that actually tiger numbers had gone down all over the country, including Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and everywhere, and the attention got focused. But we almost had guessed that 5-6 years before the crisis broke. Because the livestock deaths were going down continuously from the 80s. Yeah.
So and one of the things that I always discovered is that actually the compensation now is very good for livestock, if I'm correct. And of course, it's
about compensation.
Now I think it's reasonably good. But I think still there's a problem claiming compensation, going to the forest guards, and then following up with your case. Although I think we have a wonderful law now, which is called Public Service Guarantee Act in Madhya Pradesh. And the government has fixed a time limit for every action which public demands from the bureaucracy. And I think for livestock, it's Kapil, are you speaking?
Yeah.
I'm reminding Julian. Do you remember Cicada case that buffalo was killed just at the
of course,
and the villager, and what did the villager said? He said, "No, I'm not worried. I'll get compensation, and I'm not sad about this."
No, I get that.
I see.
That?
And that's a huge change. And
Julian, as I said, we have a law which says that compensation has to be paid within a specific time, and if it's not within a specific time, then the officers are punished.
Yeah. No,
so I think it's a 1 month period now. 1 month within the case is registered, you have to pay up,
right.
or you reject the case, whatever.
Anyway, I'm just going to move on a little bit because we're beginning to come to the end of our half an hour. It always goes far quicker than I would want. But just to give you some idea, it was at this point here when this is the top of the ridge, and you would know this ridge, and it's a beautiful ridge that overlooks Ruka and Ali and Karai, and DV Couples Up. We probably got up here at some point, and I think this was a later journey picture that I took.
You tested me. If I can climb this.
What do you mean I tested you? I helped save your feet.
Hirakud or Hira, what the name was. 2000 straight, 2000 foot we did the climb that day.
2000
Yeah.
feet.
Down,
I
where
see.
we are sitting.
I see.
Is the picture
Yeah,
he has
it seems
shown
to be
just
very,
now.
very, very steep escarpment. Actually.
But
This
DV,
gentleman, he tested my vigor and my an old man, old forest officer can climb or not.
but you know,
Yeah.
but you used to sleep very well after that, DV Kabul. You remember? You slept very well after that. I was your medical officer, and I did direct. I hope you're still going on long walks now. You need your wife to take you up a hill or two now.
Okay. I'll create hills here in Meerut and then climb.
Yeah, exactly. No, so I'm going to just. I'm afraid
Your voice and picture quality of picture is I don't think it is something wrong with my laptop or Dr. Saab, you two are
I think your face is also a little foggy. So maybe
Yeah.
you have to sit slightly behind the,
Yeah.
slightly away from the computer.
Don't
no,
worry,
actually
TV.
his voice also is not I mean
Yeah, don't worry about that now.
when you speak things are clear. When Julian speaks a lot of disturbance is there.
Oh, I see.
No. Well, there's so much jungle noise behind me, and
Oh.
I'm pedaling. I'm coming now down that ridge, and I've come into my
Yeah,
campsite.
he's huffing and puffing.
So, as you say, I'm huffing and puffing. There's a lot going on, and I'm. Are you still with me? And you're still biking brothers up. You're still biking couples up. So we're going to take you in. I'm going to now camp. This is our lovely camp. It was set up by Pagdani Safari. So as we went through the forest, we camped as part of our drive. And it's not far from where we were, just outside of Ruka. And we've made a sort of lovely site just on a little bit of farmland here. And it was a joy to be there. So the wonderful thing is we're now going to complete our event, our adventure through the corridors with two of my traveling chums. The visionary who helped me set it up, and David Capelli, who had the unfortunate task of having to take me through those wonderful areas. So big thanks to you both. You're a joy to be with. You still are. You're still in contact and still very much working hard to get those ecotourism policies working well and get lots of conservancies up. I think the future is
I think thought is still there. Maybe some people
still there. We'll keep fighting. So thank you both for joining us.
Julian is not only a good wildlifer, he's a very good actor also. Of forestry.
Everybody has to do multitasking in this world.
I'm a good producer, director. There's a whole lot of stuff going on. But I must stop you very quickly. So I'm just going to switch into a bit of a sort of sales mode. So we then end our trip in a lovely lodge in Kana called the Earth Lodge, Kana Earth Lodge. And it's part of one of our PUG certified lodges, one of the eco-friendly lodges. These are really important going forward, that we make all our lodging community beside the parks very eco-friendly, supporting the wildlife, supporting the parks, supporting the local populace, really critical. These are all why India has turned around its tiger populations and been able to save more and more of its wildlife. So if you're thinking of going traveling, want to come, really important, you look for the PUG certified lodgings when you go there. And here's a good example. So lastly, but not least, we are trying to raise money as part of this. This trek. Please look at our website. There's a donation button there. You can go to that on Facebook and download. We also can download my guidebook. I do guidebooks for wildlife and the destinations, best destinations to go to in India and Nepal. So feel free to do that. Tomorrow I'm going to be again in Kana, the lovely Kana. We're going to be with a couple of friends. We're going to be with Belinda Wright and Amit Sankla, both with huge heritages in that area. So please join me. It'll be another good half an hour. And so I just want to thank my two principal traveling companions, Dr. Pabla and my good friend DV Kapilsap.
Pleasure too, Julian. Wonderful being with you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Goodbye. Doctor, everything fine?
All
Thank
good.
you. I think we